Dan, you're reviewing Darkest Dungeon.
Oh,
Would
we're
you
talking about Darkest Dungeon?
Would you say it's more up butt or down butt?
It's a front butt. Yeah.
Darkest Dungeon is the most PC game title of a video game ever, though.
Yeah. Just about.
Yeah.
Desktop Dungeons might have it beat.
Desktop Dungeons.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a strategy game. I would call it a tactic.
Yes.
And it is a hell of a game. Like it is a really, really complex game with there's so many moving parts in this. Just like every character. So outwardly, it's very simple. And if you don't know what Darkest Dungeon is, it's a tactics game where you manage a party of 4 characters at a time. You've got a big roster, but you can pull in 4 characters into any dungeon run. Then you go into a randomly generated dungeon, and your party is just moving left to right the whole time. Regardless of what direction you're moving on the screen, or on the map on the screen, they're always moving left to right.
They're moving right butt.
Yes, they are. And it's kind of sparsely animated. Like they look kind of like paper cutouts.
Yeah.
But there's so much personality
In
to
a
it.
nice way?
Yes. I really like how it looks. Yeah.
It's a great look because I mean it's the characters are not super high detail and kind of stiffly moving, but they have just a lot of character to it. It's very expressive the way it works. And when you go into combat, it's turn-based combat. And you just walk along and you encounter some bad guys and you fight them. And there are 4 of them and 4 of you, or up to 4 of them. And there's so much going on in that game. You have to manage the position of your guys in the order 1 to 4, and they all have 4 abilities, and those abilities each can be used from a position 1 to 4 and against the enemy positions. And all those abilities are different, so you're juggling so many different things.
Right. Well, and that's before like afflictions get into the mix.
Right, so
things
afflictions,
get worse.
quirks, and just all kinds of status effects that each of those characters can have. They can each equip 2 pieces of loot that modify them. Some of them have interactions with other character classes. There are a whole bunch of character classes. I kind of forget how many there are.
So I usually love things that have that many options. Like I love the idea of myself having a party that nobody else in the world could possibly have because there's so many choices.
It's not that diverse.
Is it overwhelming?
It is kind of overwhelming. Yes.
I mean, there's like a dozen, 15 classes, right?
Give or
At least
take,
when I
yeah.
played, yeah.
Yeah, and then
But I mean,
different
if-
variants.
And they're like
in them.
non-traditional though. There's like the highwayman, there's the grave robber, the plague doctor.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And each of them they each have 4 abilities, but each of them have I think there are 6 possible abilities per character, and each one gets a random. When you recruit them, they each have a random assortment of those. So that adds another layer to it because you can spec one of these guys to be a frontline character who takes a bunch of damage and deals a lot of damage, or he can be a rear character who heals and does support stuff, or is artillery kind of style. Like there's a bunch of variation you can do on each of these characters, and it is a bit overwhelming. It takes a while to get into. I mean, the tutorials are okay, but I mean, and it's actually not great at telling you what some of the effects of these abilities are. Like,
Have you played Divinity Original Sin?
Some.
It's like
not
a
a
huge
whole.
problem I had with that game was like specking out my characters at the start and not knowing what combinations of different things I would choosing would end up doing. And
Right.
there was some things like I would choose certain elements and then they would cancel each other out in combat,
Whoops.
but it never told me that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so you can play like 40 hours of that game and then be like, I have to start over again because I need to respec everyone.
And it does. To be clear, it does tell you what everything does. It's just when you mouse over it. And it gives you kind of the pop-up. It's just a kind of a jumble of numbers and letters, and it's just kind of hard to sit there and digest it all, especially on the fly. So you've got to plan the composition of your party, the order of your party, the equipment of your party. You have to provision your party, so like they have to eat when they're in the dungeon.
Cool.
There's an entire separate set of abilities that they need for camping. So some missions are longer, so you have to make camp, and you can. And each character has camping abilities that they can use to boost your health, or I didn't even talk about stress.
Oh,
Stress is a
my
massive
favorite
thing.
part of the
That's
game.
the best, right? Because I love the water cooler effect this game has, where after every dungeon run, you come out and it's like, okay, we got through it, but like the priest went insane after stress and had to go to the asylum, and the ranger developed the affinity for alcohol and lives in the bar now.
He goes to the tavern in between missions, and that's how we relieve
That's
stress.
awesome.
And if stress gets too high, your character can have a heart attack in the middle of a dungeon, and it's permadeath, and they die.
Yep.
I
Which
love
is
that. That
so
makes me think
cool.
of like
So-
Wasteland. Like,
yeah.
the
And
stuff
it's-
that happened in my Wasteland playthrough was just it was just I was so distraught the whole time, and like my medic would die, and then everyone would like be exploded upon and lose limbs, and I'd be like, my medic's dead.
Yes, stress and negative effects are the big thing for this game. Like, it's already a really great game. I love the way it looks. I love the way it plays. But it's going into every battle going, okay, if my priest gets below 5 health or whatever, like 2 health, there's a chance that she'll just kill herself, or a chance that she will recover everything. Like,
Wow.
Stuff like that. Like, huge risk-reward abilities on
So
these
just
characters.
to take a step back, you said that you like the way that it looks.
Yes.
The dungeons are randomly generated, so how does that affect the way that they look?
I mean, it is kind of a very basic look to it in that it's very flat. You're kind of it's almost
It's more like an
Hanna-Barbera.
overworld.
It's like Hanna-Barbera cartoons where you're walking past they're walking in a simple animation and the background is just kind of cycling.
Okay.
Like it's
are a lot of the environments really similar?
I mean there are I think 5 different environments now.
Yeah. I mean, similar
and
in a way that it's all sort of like dark Lovecraftian horror
Uh-huh.
fantasy.
Yeah,
Everything looks like a Cthulhu comic book.
Right.
Okay.
So
it looks nice.
Yeah,
I
So
like that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's going to run on any computer, which is one of the nice
Yeah.
things. It's very low low requirements, but oh man, there's just so much going on in this game, so much.
Yeah.
Oh, and the narrator. The
narrator is really
it's-
cool, too.
It's
Yeah.
probably my favorite narrator
So
in any game.
There's a narrative as well?
It's very loose.
yeah.
But it's
Right.
it's more like the narrative is more like tone
Yeah.
than
Okay.
story.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
it's very brooding.
there is
Makes
a
sense.
story. It's like, oh, your grandfather or whatever has called you. He went nuts, like digging under his house and searching for all these supernatural things, and he found it and went more nuts, and then the house like fell into ruin as he explored it.
That's cool.
And there's especially with the bosses, there's some stuff where he'll kind of tell you some background lore to it, but it's not so much like progressing through a story. It's just like, here's a bunch of little stories.
Yeah, it's the
things.
story of
Okay.
how
It's-
you narrowly survived that.
Yeah, and the
Okay.
narrator sort of reminds me of Bastion
Yeah, I was
gonna
in a little
say.
bit, where
Right,
like
yeah.
there is like an overall story of Bastion, but it's more about those like little moments where he's commenting on something you did,
Right.
and it
Bastion's
feels like
amazing.
it's like
The game is paying
handmade
attention.
narration for
Yeah,
you.
Yep.
Yeah,
yeah.
it feels like the game's paying attention, which I really like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you score a critical hit, he'll say something about like, oh,
Lucky strike or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget what's the word, but just like
Lucky Strike's a bowling alley.
like
It'd be funny if it's not in, like,
brilliantly
a Halo way,
executed
right?
kind of
It's
stuff.
not
yeah.
like
Kill
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is, except with less
Slayer.
yeah.
Team Slayer.
Yeah, it's just a little bit less bro.
Yeah.
It's in universe, so
It's not
so
hard
it's
to be
like-
less
yeah.
bro than the Halo announcer,
Yeah.
to be fair.
Yeah, this was we first previewed this game many PAXs
Well,
ago.
because it's been in early access for
Yeah.
a year.
I was gonna say, like, this is the game that last year that Damon and I were like, this is the first great game of 2015, and now it's the first great game of
Dude, I
2016.
legit think I previewed this game at 1UP.
Wow.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, seriously.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to see if that article exists.
I think I probably lied.
So I've heard like
Colin,
almost
you on your
nothing
bluff.
about it.
Yeah, it's been on early access for the better part of a year.
Yeah, I
Since
put
last
in
January,
Yeah.
Yeah, I put in like probably 20 or 30 hours when it first came out on early access, and it's just been polished since then. I will say, and this is one of those reviewer problems that most people, actually no one will have, because gearing up for the actual release and the review, they sent me a reviewer copy. I'm like, okay, and they're like, oh, this is the final version. I'm like, great, I'll dig in now. So I spent a bunch of hours, probably about another 12 or 15 hours playing it, and I got I hit like a brick wall of difficulty. When you level up your characters to level 3, they can no longer do the basic level dungeons. They have to do the intermediate level dungeons. So I started doing those and just got slaughtered.
It seems like a weird choice to not let you do easy dungeons.
Well, they
grind
don't.
if you want to.
Well, they don't want you they want you to grind because you have to grind up your new characters to replace the dead ones.
Right, yeah.
But they don't want you to go through that with a high level character and just blow through it
and have them like drag a low level guy
Okay.
to higher levels.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, they don't want one high level guy carrying a bunch of people
Yeah.
through there because otherwise, what's the point in it?
Yeah.
You lose all the difficulty. And this is a difficult game. It's supposed to be difficult, and it's. But they went kind of overboard with that version. So I just hit this brick wall and like spent a bunch of time just I kept losing characters like crazy. Couldn't complete any dungeons. Like 1 in 5 I'd get through, and then the next mission those guys would get killed. So I wasn't making any progress. And then like the morning it came out, I got an email from the developer saying like, oh yeah, we saw you tweeting about how steep that difficulty incline is. We got that a lot from a lot of people, so we're turning that down a little bit.
Oh, great.
I'm like, well, that's great for everyone but me.
Yeah.
Does that mean you had to restart it?
No, I didn't have to restart, but I there
Download
were
a patch and
there were a bunch of dead guys I didn't get back, but I didn't lose all my progress.
R.I.P.
So.
Have you finished it yet?
No. Well, because of that,
Yeah.
partially because of that. I don't know how long it's going to take me to finish it, but I'm over that hump now. Because,
Yeah.
So
but,
it sounds really good to me so far. What's some of the stuff that you don't like about it?
like I said, it is not great about communicating some detailed effects for what some of the abilities do. It can get very daunting to try to configure a party in an optimal way because they're all such complex characters.
Yeah.
They all have so many different random effects. Like some of them, and you pick up traits as you go along. Like sometimes they'll be progressing through one of the 5 different environments, and they'll get a either bonus or what's the opposite of bonus? A debuff in that realm going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to kind of remember that. And you have to sort through your character. It's all displayed in their card, but it's like, oh yeah, I can't put him in there
Do
because.
you think it would be easier if you had less characters to manage?
Yes and no.
Maybe if you had less to worry about with each of them.
It's
I
like
love
a
the
lot of it
idea
is.
that, though.
Yeah.
Like, I love the
I love the idea of it
Yes.
as well, but in practice, there's just kind of excuse me, kind of too much going on.
It's okay, Dan.
Yeah, I'm all for cleanse.
I'm really emotional.
I'm really
I'm
emotional
choked up
that.
about this.
Just
His stress levels are
grave, bro.
stress levels are amazing.
Yeah.
What if he becomes an alcoholic?
But I mean that's kind of my biggest complaint is that it gets fiddly. Like there's just too much going on sometimes, and I do like it all in concept.
Yeah, again, you're still that, like you saying that is like, yeah, I'm gonna love this. This sounds great, but I can imagine in practice I would get frustrated.
Yeah, it's like you talk to a lot of designers in this job, and what you hear over and over again from a lot of them is the hardest thing to do is to know when not to put in a new system because it's just too much.
Yeah.
It's like how much is that really adding to it?
Yeah.
And is it worth the added complexity that that it's going to be difficult for new players to get into it. It's going to be hard for old players to I mean even some of them will appreciate it, I guess, but it can be more trouble than it's worth. It can add balance problems, all sorts of things. I guess I'm also a little bit disappointed with the loot. I love the loot system in Diablo where the legendary items will not just boost your stats but give you entirely new abilities. These are just stat boosts.
Yeah.
And those stat boosts can be potent enough with the ultra rares. They can be potent enough to really change the way you use a character because it will give you such a boost to use of one skill and a debuff to another that it's like, well, this guy is now clearly a frontline guy or clearly a support guy, but it's not quite the same as getting something that just like adds a lightning effect to a spell and just kind of changes the way you use it.
It's kind of uncommon for games not to do that at this point. Like most things will give you abilities for loot. Like most recent RPGs I can think of do that. It's an odd choice to not have that, but maybe it's that they didn't want to give you even more to manage.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you look at the difference between like Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, where the legendary weapons in Fallout 4 and gear will give you new abilities, whereas Fallout 3 never had that.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a clear, that's something I really like about Fallout 4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is also Red Hook Studios, I believe is the
Yes.
name of the developer. It was a Kickstarter game. It was their first game. Like they all came from various backgrounds of sort of quasi AAA studios. I think they're from Canada somewhere. One of Mitchville.
You like how you looked at Mitch. You're like, they're from Canada?
Canada,
He's like, oh,
right?
yeah.
He looks like, yeah,
Yeah,
they're
they're
from
local.
You know them, right?
Canada. Yeah, you know
Yeah,
them
right.
well.
Yeah, one of them is my uncle.
There are 7 people in Canada.
The Darkest Dire.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think like I like what you said about how like the game runs fine on this, which is great. Which this isn't like a powerhouse
Yeah, that
by
is
any
awesome.
means.
What's the sound design like? Because it looks like a game that would have nice sound.
Oh, it's got really bombastic gothic music.
Yeah,
and
like the
very
sound
disabling
effects are like
atmosphere.
gross, sort of
Yeah.
a lot of the like
Nice.
hit,
like the
hits
bleed
of the-
effects, like
yeah.
squish.
Yeah,
it's really,
everything is
really
just really unpleasant
Yep.
about it.
I love that, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I might go play this on my Mac.
good. Yes.
Yeah, I'm really good.
I'll
It's
play it
coming
wherever.
It's out on PC and Mac now. It's coming to PS4 and Vita in a couple months.
Cool.
I feel like this would make a really good iOS game too. I feel like I could.
It would.
Yeah.
I worry about the UI. Like there's a lot on screen that you have to make work with touch buttons. You can do
you
it.
couldn't just do like a 1-to-1 port. You'd have to like.
Yeah, there's already some fiddliness to it with the map and inventory screen, where it's like I would love to have both those on screen at once, but you can't.
Yeah.
You have to flip between them.
Yeah. Really cool. I remember, when I just pulled up my tweet, I said this was one of my favorite games of PAX East 2 years ago.
Wow. Back when you were 1-up.
Was it? I guess it wasn't at 1-up.
No, not even close.
Nope, Marty's a liar.
I said, well, it's PAX East Day 2. My favorite things so far: Darkest Dungeon, Valiant Hearts, Gods Will Be Watching, and Andrew Goldfarb.
Oh my God, Gods Will Be Watching, Valiant Hearts,
man.
excellent games.
What about Andrew?
And Andrew Goldfarb. He's also a great game. No, oh my God, I love Valiant Hearts.
Not Andrew so much though. I remember the way they described it though is they wanted to do a Lovecraftian Band of Brothers. Like in terms of like
that's
how
a really
like
good
throughout
pitch.
those 10 episodes, like the characters are way different by the end than they were at the beginning. Like they were all like lost souls by the end.
Wow.
Which I thought was really cool.
They definitely are.
Yeah.
Yeah, this just kind of reminds me of how reviewing games has just become trying to hit a moving target. Just because like all the 0-day patches and everything. Yeah. Like I still remember the first time that happened to me. Where I
like ever?
SimCity?
No, way before that. It was Dawn of War 2.
Okay. I love that game so much.
It was a really good game. I flew out to Relic to review it. This was for PC Gamer way back when.
This had to be like 2005-ish.
Yeah, somewhere in there. No, well, it must have been a little later than that because it was one of the first games to require Steam.
Okay.
One of the first non-Valve.
Dawn of War 2 released in 2009.
8?
9.
Okay.
I keep hearing you say Dong of War.
Dong of War.
Different game altogether. So I flew out to Relic to review it. And this was for a print publication. So this was almost 2 months before the game came out. So I reviewed it. I liked it a lot, but there were just too many of these kind of randomly generated or procedurally generated filler missions. And that was one of the main criticisms I put in there was like, great game, but just kind of too repetitive in getting through the campaign. And so I finished the review at that time. Like when we were done with the issue, like you lock it in, you can't change it. So it's like, okay, we've finished that. We've sent it off to the press. Send the review to Relic so they can take a look at it. And they read over that and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Let's change that. And
that's
again,
even worse than them just like having a patch, but them using your review to decide what to change.
It's like, I guess I'm a consultant now.
Yeah,
but
pretty much.
But I mean, and again, that works out well for everyone but me,
Yes.
because and for me too, because I get a better game out of it in the end.
Yeah.
But my review,
your review's a little bit invalidated the moment it hits.
Yeah, it's like one of my chief complaints they fixed.
Yeah.
It's just kind of awkward for me. Everyone else makes out like a bandit. They get a better game out of it.
Yeah.
Good
We were
job,
actually
Dan.
talking about the other day what you would have to do to give something a 0. Like what kind of game would
I gave
you
a game
ever
a 1 at IGN.
Really? What was it?
It was Self-Defense Training Camp.
Why did you give it a 1?
It was a Kinect game for Xbox
Well, there you go.
360.
No need to say more.
Instead of teaching
No,
you
I was
self-defense, you
thinking
hurt
that
yourself.
SimCity would be something I would give a 0 when it
Really?
launched.
Well, at
It didn't
launch,
do
Well, it
anything.
didn't. It was completely broken. at
Exactly,
launch.
but IGN didn't give it a 0. They just waited.
Well,
right?
yeah, I did that review, and
So
I
you just waited to review it rather than
right,
give
and
it a score
I was
immediately?
waiting to review it anyway because the only time we had to play with
Because you couldn't play it.
Yeah, well, the only time I had to play it was at a review event that EA had. I'm like, this is not enough to review a SimCity
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
So you're a perfect person to ask. What would a game have to do to get a 0?
Yeah, I mean, it would just have to be completely non-functional.
Like SimCity was?
No, because there
Arguably.
were parts of that game that did I don't know. I played that
Really
game.
small parts
If
that
you
didn't
had
function.
if you
Yeah.
had to score it like like the first day it came out, then yeah, it's like it doesn't work.
Or like if you were trying to score the Master Chief Collection multiplayer, it'd be like, this doesn't work.
But wasn't
Well,
that
it did work.
that
It-
it didn't work well right at first.
Sure, yeah.
Like, it
so
wasn't
even
that-
that would
yeah.
probably get a 2.
But
Like-
yeah, and in most cases with online dependent games these days, because those problems are usually very transient. Like there'll be server problems on day one. It's like you don't
Yeah.
want to score a game based on that because then
Because
you're,
you know it can change.
Yeah.
yeah, it's like they're probably like 9 times out of 10 they're gonna fix that within 24 to 48
So
hours.
I guess the idea is anything that you would give a 0 is something that they wouldn't release or that they would work on.
Did you write our review guidelines for scores?
Yes, I did.
0 to 0.9, disaster. One of the worst games ever made. Games that score this low are rare because it's reserved for those that simply don't work or are outright frauds. They've really got to work for it. This is probably also where we'd put a game about how awesome Nazis are. 0 to 0.9.
Is Extreme Paint Brawl?
Extreme Paint Brawl, I think, is the lowest scoring game on IGN.
Really?
I think so.
I'm excited.
0.7.
Yeah.
0.7.
Oh, it's because you play as a Nazi.
They
Nazis love paintball.
They do. They're big fans.
And known for that.
Yeah.
The subhead for this review is Extreme? Yeah, like my mom and her modern dance class.
Jesus.
How old is this?
That's pretty old.
Amazing.
Written by Tal Blevins in 1998.
Oh, man.
Wow.
That's so great. Whoa, there's one nice thing I can say about Extreme Paint Brawl. The soundtrack was clean, crisp, and heavy. Just how I like it in a high-action game.
If for some reason you do happen to end up with Extreme Paint Brawl, I suggest you put it in a brown paper bag, place it in front of your neighbor's door, set it on fire, and run like hell, because it's going to make one raucous stink. Tal Blevins.
Amazing.
Wow, 0.7.
Yes.
So, yeah, what was bad about it?
Everything.
If you like blocky, outdated,
has
highly
no
pixelated
AI.
graphics, this is the game for you. Flimsy and accurate manual and no
Wow.
variety in gameplay, very poor showing. The heavy guitar riffs were pretty cool, but I had one hell
So
of a
I
time
think
trying to
the
configure
only reason
my
it didn't
sound
get a
card.
flat 0 is because of sound.
It's because Tal
It
loves
sounded
heavy
okay.
guitar riffs.
He's a big fan of guitar riffs.
I mean, there's a argument that pretty much below, 4 and below is pretty much redundant. Like we're saying it's bad, don't buy it.
Yeah.
There are two people viewing this article right now. Is one of them you?
No.
Who else is on this
Tal's had it
article?
open since 1998, Mitch.
I just left the first comment on
His
the
favorite
article,
review.
and I wrote first.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's like there's totally an argument that like the bottom half of the scale is kind of redundant. Like a 0 to 4, it's like we're saying don't buy this.
Yeah.
So
I would see like 5 to 7 as, buy this one. It's a little cheaper maybe.
yeah, just that's mediocre to good. So
Yeah.
I would say maybe like 5 and 6 are
Yeah.
kind of bundled together. Five is
you're probably
mediocre
right.
and 6
And
is
then
okay.
7 and 8 might be bundled together.
But I mean that's because our scale has so much gradation to it.
Yeah.
It's expressive.